Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello guys, we are from third group. Here we will explain and present about literature and art. The members of our groups are consist of Mufliatul Suril Arifah, Mimi Hamidah, Uzratul Izzah, and Nurhania Fikrina. For the first presentation will be delivered by myself. Okay, here I will explain about literature and art, visual art of pre-modern Indonesian visual art and puppets. The first is about literature and art. The wonders include carving, weaving, drawing, and painting and include dots, masks, past art, and eclectic forms of modern artistic expression. Throughout its history, art and visual literature in Indonesia represent the dark side of life and dark sequences. This creative form embodies balance while allowing for ambiguity and complexity in expression and interpretation. Modern Indonesian art and literature doesn't have to focus on the beauty of the subject, but interpret the injustice and suffering of life into painting. To paint, carve, or writing about violence, injustice, and the suffering of life so that it becomes a powerful medium for political criticism. In addition, art and literature involve social values and realities beyond written stories or painted pictures, like life in Indonesia. Okay, for the next is about visual arts. There are six that will be discussed about visual art. First is about pre-modern Indonesian visual art. Before Indian or other foreign influences, indigenous art and skills developed in the Indonesian island much longer. Now, however, scientists are realizing that while the Indonesia island absorbed influences from mainland Southeast Asia, Indian, Chinese, Arab, European, and beyond local, invented and independently developed craftsmanship. Like the carving of the statue in the picture, Buddhism and Hinduism originated in India, carrying a highly developed religious and aesthetic heritage. Indian ideology and aesthetic became major factor in the success of the dynasty that later established the great stone monuments of Central and East Java. The complexity and elegance of the relief stone panels on the Japanese monuments reveal the sophisticated carving skills and sophisticated design sense of the artisan of the period. Hundreds of panels and three-dimensional freestanding stone figures adorn one of the most impressive monuments ever constructed anywhere in the world, Borobudur in Central Java. The relief carving along the path to the top of the temple depicts stories of the Buddha's early incarnation on earth, called Jataka tales. The monument also contains depiction of heaven or nirvana and hell. Now renovated, Borobudur is a major tourist and pilgrimage site, a largely open-air museum of ancient stone and architectural splendor. Okay, next. The next is visual art about puppets. One art form is very popular in parts of Indonesia, especially in Bali and Java, and broadly refers to tradition art, stories, culture, values, and performance skills that often appear on the covers of books and travel brochures as a kind of emblem for the country. Firstly, their puppets, called wayang kulit, represent many characters, animals, and natural forms as visual and performing art. The puppets pass through the shadows with the colorful details that make them interesting, but the colors usually don't show through the screen to the viewer. Wayang are performance puppets which are painted with ornate carving and mounted on bamboo or bone rods that run on fire as their center to support and serve as handles for the puppeteer to hold from below. Ordinary people make a living through art and imagination by bringing in cartwheel-driven mini theaters and characters. Okay, maybe that's all from my presentation. For the next topic will be delivered by my partner.
Mask, Indonesian art. Mask embody the greatest power for transformation of people and dramatic characters. Called topeng in the Indonesian language, masks of all sorts animate dance dramas, festivals, and rituals, assisting in offering and personifying good and evil. In some regions, men have donned masks in battle, and healers have worn them in rituals for the sick. Indonesian islands are also finally met and ritual importance such as Mask of Bali. While Masks of Bali are among the most extravagantly constructed. The Tababatak people of northern Sumatra have formed large, simply carved wooden masks at funeral plots, and the neighboring Karo people wore large helmets, like masks of wood representing either people or horses. Traveling medicine men of Sumatra wear simple wooden masks to advertise their healing powers as they sit behind their wares at open markets. The wood of the mask emulates the magical powers of the herbs and barks the healer sell and use. Masks of the Dayak people in regions of Kalimantan portray enemies, spirits, and earthly creatures. Some bear elaborate extension and resemble those of Northwest Coast indigenous people of North America. Dayak mask portray pigs, deer, tigers, dragons, and people. Men wear them at important times of year during rice planting or harvesting. Sometimes, as they dance within the community longhouses for which Dayak are famous. Masks of Timor Island are simply carved of wood, then decked with soot. People say that wearers are local. Priests wore them in dance. These masks differ greatly from the finely detailed ones of Bali and Java, and express characters and concepts of enemies cultures of Eastern Indonesia. Sometimes, Timor masks derive their shapes from certain pieces of wood, and the tangled roots of a tree might become the hair of a mask. People believe that these objects receive their powers from particular trees and places in keeping with local spirits of nature. Temple painting. Illustrating scared tales, people historically created paintings on large cloths and then hung these on walls and eaves of temple pavilions. Figures in these paintings appear in standard three-quarters view, as do shadow puppets. In temple pieces, otherwise empty space, teemed with birds, vegetation, or water drops to portray an atmosphere full of vibrancy. As do many arts of Bali and Java, temple paintings frequently portray images from revered Indian epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. These paintings use literal perspective to suggest space, instead composing everything at the same distance from the viewer. All forms occupy the same plane. The Kartagosa or Palace of Justice is filled with paintings built in the early 18th century at Klungkung, Bali. These lavish pictures decorate the entire section tailing of this pavilion, numbering 267 panels. The painting vividly reflected an aesthetic penchant for aesthetic precision, opulence, and excellence throughout Bali during this era. Modern Indonesian art. An art scholar from Java considers that modern Indonesian visual art was born in a rush and then developed quickly without following any prolonged or traditional literary course. It is built as a product of strong Western influences, and its character for a long time was conditioned by this circumstance. While true to a great degree regarding initial factors bringing modern art to nations, this statement seems too dismissive of indigenous artistry and ideas. The modern art movement in Java and Sumatra largely came out of study clubs in the early 20th century, in which elite in Indonesia grew acquainted with foreign art and literature. In the 19th 1920, 1930, and 1940, few tourists visited Bali, but enough when or as did visiting friends of residents, foreign artists and celebrities such as Charlie Chaplin. The growing market developed for Balinese village life. Painting that continues to this day. Anthropologists Marges Met and Gregory Bateson researched in Bali during this time and collected paintings of the period, many of which they commissioned. The birth of modern painting in Indonesia coincided with the birth of the nationalist movement and the portrayal of ordinary Indonesian as typical Indonesian labor and activities become themes with a revolutionary message. It enriched modern Indonesian art and literature with a passion and social and historical consciousness that came to define it worldwide. In the 1950s, Hendra moved to Yogyakarta, Java, where he joined a newly formed group, Young Painters of Indonesia, headed by Sujijono. Later, he joined Painters Effendi and others in the group People's Painters, and with his wife set up sort of a farm where artists could stay, and even enable some to study for free. Mass tourism produced the most recent and pervasive effect upon modern Indonesian art on the wholes of world collecting of ethnic arts. Global fashion culture consensus from motifs on non-Western societies created a Euro-American phenomenon of ethnic chic. For more than 30 years, Indonesia hosted hordes of international visitors. Bali was a thriving hub for surfers, Hollywood film stars, honeymooners, New Age self-improvement groups, budget travelers, wealthy tourists renting idyllic villas, and seekers of a tropical paradise. Here, Indonesian could see the main sources for art of the archipelago, along with contemporary world trends in design, and just had other artists for centuries. They began to adapt and alter their creations to both reflect their knowledge of other worlds and to appeal to a global market.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello, I am Min Hamida. I will explain briefly about textiles and early Indonesian writing. Here, the two main woven fabrics, ikat and batik. The first, ikat, comes from the Indonesian word mengikat. The main dyes used in ikat are indigo blue nude and rust red. There are many other colorings, for example, making in the color of wine or close to blacks. Indigo color is often used by old women. Morindo red, like in Sumba, is only for royalty. This is for an examples. The Sumbanes ikat cloth reflects skill, imagination, borrowed local and foreign enemies motifs, and the dualistic nature of the islands and more traditional belief systems. In the 1980s and 1990s, ikat was very popular with international tourists and collectors. So people from Sumba, Timor, Flores, Savu, and other islands started devising new types of ikat to attract foreign race. Then the second, batik. Batik has two methods. First, using chanting, and second, using stamping. If you use a chanting, you can make it by drawing in the cloth manually. Meanwhile, if you use a stamp, you only need to put the stamp on the cloth. Batik is one of the identities of the Indonesian nation.
and has been appreciated nationally and internationally. Next, early Indonesian writing. Written scripts began to appear in Indonesia in the 4th century. As the beliefs and culture were influenced by South India, a script appeared called Pallawa, then transformed into Indonesianese, which is called Kawi, which means poetic. Then, in 1930, there was the Kaganga alphabet from South Sumatra. Before the spread of Islam, people enjoyed a kafawin, old romantic poetry literature, which was popular for love letters and poetry and was written on pandan petals or palm leaves. Then there are stories called hikayat, written in Melayu in Arabic script. A type of language is called Jawi. There is also a chronicle written in Old Javanese. Maybe that's all. That's a little exposure from me. Thank you.
Okay, I will explain about literature. The first is modern Indonesian writing. A historian, the following observation after studying nationalism, communities to be distinguished not by diversity or genuineness, but by the style in which they are imagined. 38 following the Dutch literacy campaign, a rapidly expanding population of Indonesians started to think about themselves in relation to this thing, and now versions of in profoundly different way. Print capitalism broadened thinking by enabling individuals to read in a common language, whether Dutch or Malay, and thus perceive themselves as a part of larger communities or nation. After that, more the individuals had access to writing in the European Roman script, which was a common form of expression. Literacy alters the way that people conceive of time and event and how they imagine themselves and their world. Reading permits pause for mental reflection that listening to a spoken tell might not. Moreover, beginning and ending become distinct in writing form, as even in linear sequence that chronicle the passing of time. Some have noticed that in not literate societies, visual and oral memories are extraordinarily acute because people fully engage their sense for recording, even an image. Mental retention of sight and sound creates narrative in such culture, where people critically rely upon memorization in the passing on of knowledge. The Indonesian literary journal Pujangga Baru Nyuput began in the 1930. Many scholars since have remarked upon the disproportionate number of Sumatran writers represented in the new publication, especially those from the Minangkabau region, where the language was closely related to Malay, later to become the Indonesian national language. Indonesian written works. The first example is some Sumatran authors transformed oral autobiographies and traditional male travel adventures, called rantau, traveling abroad to gain prestige, wealth, and manhood, into published works in the first half of the 20th century. The second example is Kartini wrote a series of letters largely to friend the Netherlands, describing her life in colonial Java and expressing a passionate desire to study in Holland and learn more of the world. This became a book years after Kartini's death. Letters of a Japanese princess, first published in English in 1920. The second explanation is popular literary culture. The first example is among this genre was the popular Lupus series created by Hilman Hariwijaya. Lupus books began circulating in 1986, starring a mildly rebellious teenagers by Western standard, embodying all symbols of Indonesian youthful cool to his readers. Along with prestigious names from Lee in Lupus Young, hip Jakartans use terms like a killah and that is right lah is a particular of emphasis in Indonesian use at the end of a word, thus mixing languages to claim their own unique speech style. The second example is in 1980 until 1990. In Indonesia, it was popular about comics written by native Indonesians such as the French Asterix and the American Charles Brown. Okay, this is our explanation. Maybe there are